It's been 6 months since I bought a Sonos Era 300, and I've never heard anything quite like it. It has the ability to recreate the music like you're listening to it live. For example, when I got back from my trip to see the legendary composer John Williams conduct the Boston Pops, I could kick back, relax, and listen to his music on this speaker, feeling like I had never left the performance. But it's not just orchestral music. This speaker sounds incredible, with music from tons of different artists. Another really good example of this is The Middle by Reese Lewis. The vocals in this track are so forward, it sounds like he's singing right in front of you. And if there's enough room behind it, the Era 300 can make it sound like there's a piano several feet behind the speaker. But why can this speaker place instruments and vocals so precisely? Two reasons. The first is this speaker supports Dolby Atmos music. Dolby Atmos is a newer music format developed within the past decade, and unlike the stereo format where you have a right and left channel, Dolby Atmos is an object-based audio format, which allows sound mixers and engineers to digitally place different parts of a music track around a virtual room during the mixing process. This causes you as a listener to notice different things like instrumentation or vocal effects more in the Atmos mix than in the stereo version. And you'll also notice that with Atmos tracks, they're typically not as loud as their stereo counterparts. That's because Dolby Atmos requires mixes to be at -18 LKFS, which is why they'll sound about 10 decibels quieter than their stereo counterparts. This actually gives Atmos tracks more headroom, which is why Atmos tracks often have better dynamic range than their stereo counterparts, though that's also due to an increasing trend with stereo mixes to be mixed as loud as possible. Not all Atmos mixes sound good though. Early versions of Atmos music have a tendency to drown out vocals with instrumentation. Tracks like Wonder by Shawn Mendes, About Damn Time by Lizzo, or I Think He Knows by Taylor Swift all fall victim to this. But then you have Atmos tracks like I talked about earlier that do sound really good with this speaker. So why is it that music can sound so good with the Era 300? Well, that brings me to the second reason music sounds incredible with this speaker: its design. The Sonos Era 300 was built from the ground up for spatial audio. It houses one forward-firing tweeter meant for vocals and lead instruments, a left and right tweeter, left and right woofer, and then an upward-firing tweeter that reflects sound off your ceiling. The speaker also features custom waveguides to help further the placement of different parts of a music track in your space. Overall, the sound is excellent. It has a nice warmth to it, deep bass, and clear highs and mids. Now, if Dolby Atmos sounds familiar, it's probably for the other thing it's famous for, which is TV shows and movies. And yes, you can use a pair of Sonos Era 300s as rears with a Sonos soundbar for an Atmos setup, but you cannot use a pair of them as front speakers with your TV. Speaker placement is another important consideration with the Era 300. You'll need to make sure you give it enough room to be able to place sound around a room. It'll sound best on a table in a center of a room in my experience. When you do this, you'll get an immersive experience with clear vocals, deep bass, and a pretty unique experience with that height channel. Some other highlights of this speaker include its new speaker controls, which now gives you this nice indented volume bar, plus an area for play pause, skip forward, skip back, and a voice assistant button. There's also a physical mic mute switch on this speaker, which will physically disconnect the mic from power if you don't care about the voice features. And speaking of voice features, like with the Era 100 and the Sonos Move Gen 2, we have videos out on both of these speakers now, the Era 300 also does not have the Google Assistant. It only supports the Amazon Assistant and Sonos Voice Control, but overall they work quite well on this speaker and they're very fast at responding. But not having the Google Assistant, that is definitely a downgrade over the previous Sonos experience. Another Sonos feature I love is the grouping feature. If you have another Sonos speaker or group playing music, just hold the play pause button on the Era 300 and it'll play the same music as the other speakers in your system. Another highlight of the experience with this speaker is the Sonos app. You'll get features like TruePlay tuning, which is what you'll use to optimize your speaker's sound. For iOS users, you have your traditional TruePlay tuning, which is now called Advanced, or the new Quick Tuning feature, which uses the onboard mics to quickly tune the speaker, and Android users for the first time will actually see TruePlay in their Sonos app, but they'll only have access to the Quick Tune option. In the Sonos system settings, you also have the ability to pair the Era 300 or a pair of them with a Sonos sub, and you can also adjust how intense that upward firing speaker is with the height audio setting. Lastly, you get an EQ, unlike other speakers like the HomePod Gen 2. Speaking of which, the Era 300 blows it out of the water for spatial audio. Another great part of this speaker's design is it supports line-in via a USB-C dongle that Sonos sells. You can adjust the latency in the Sonos app and get it to where it's barely noticeable, making it perfect for a wide variety of applications like plugging it into your turntable. And if you do that, you can actually play the music coming from your record player across your entire Sonos system wirelessly, which is pretty cool. The speaker also supports Bluetooth, which is nice to see, though Dolby Atmos music isn't supported over Bluetooth with this speaker at the time of recording. The last thing I've enjoyed about owning this speaker is how easy it was to set up. The setup was fast and it only took a few minutes, and it's even faster if you already have Sonos devices. Now let's talk about some of the downsides I've encountered with this speaker, and there are quite a few. Now, the first one is if you play just regular stereo tracks on the Era 300, they just don't sound as good as the Atmos tracks. Sound is projected out of the sides of the speaker more with non-Atmos tracks and not as much out the front, which is more of what you want with stereo tracks and what you get with other Sonos speakers like the Era 100, which we've also reviewed. And not every music streaming service supports Dolby Atmos yet. As I pointed out in my music streaming comparison videos for 2023, link in the description below if you're interested, YouTube Music and Spotify, they don't support Dolby Atmos. The services you can use with the Era 300 that support Dolby Atmos at the time of recording are Amazon Music Unlimited and Apple Music. And related to Atmos, another downside with this speaker is to play Atmos music on it, you must use the Sonos app. Atmos cannot be airplayed from Apple devices to the Sonos Era 300, which would be way more convenient because sometimes I've encountered a few errors every once in a while. Also, I'm hoping Sonos will at least be able to give us some sort of lock screen interactive widget like they have on Android, which I use on my Pixel tablet all of the time. Speaking of Pixel tablets, Android. If you're an Android user, unfortunately you're still treated as a second-class user by Sonos with their refusal to support Google Cast on their products. Another downside I've encountered is when you listen to music on another Sonos speaker like my Sonos Roam for example, and bring the Roam to the Era 300 for the music transfer feature. The music will transfer and start playing on the Era 300, but it will then stop for several seconds. It stops for so long I would often just walk over to the speaker and tap that play button again. But if you give it 10 seconds or so, it'll start playing again, but play the Atmos version of the music that you transferred. The last downside, and it's a potential downside because I personally haven't encountered it yet, but Sonos did confirm it, and this is when you use the Sonos Era 300s as rears for a Dolby Atmos setup, the center tweeter on the 300s is actually turned off for more sound separation, which might disappoint some who are swapping out Sonos ones. So those are all of the downsides I've encountered with this speaker. Now let's talk recommendations. Overall, this speaker has a ton of potential, but it still feels like Sonos and the other companies in the industry need to fill in the rest of the gaps before Atmos can really take off. But don't take that as me saying I don't recommend this speaker, I do. I've been so transfixed by this speaker and the listening experience you get with it. For me, it has absolutely been worth the $449 Sonos charges for it. It is by far the best piece of audio equipment for listening to Atmos tracks that I have used. So now let's get into what situations I'd recommend using the Era 300 for, and then how many I'd recommend you buy. For small to medium-sized rooms for music listening, I think most people will be fine with just one Era 300. Because of the way it projects sound around a room so well, you don't necessarily need to purchase two, like you often would with other speakers like the Era 100. For larger rooms where you do have a lot of space to cover, That's where I'd look at buying two and stereo pairing them together. And because I haven't personally used a set of these as rears for an Atmos TV setup, I can't give you a recommendation one way or the other for that use case. Now, if most of the music you're planning to listen to is in stereo and not Atmos, in most cases, I'd probably go for the Era 100s instead. The Era 300 isn't designed to be a directional speaker like the Era 100s, which stereo tracks really benefit from. And to learn more about those speakers, check out the full 6 months later review I did of them. So those are all of my thoughts and recommendations on the Sonos Era 300. If you think I got it right, or you think I got it wrong, make sure you let me know down in the comments, and I've left purchase links in the description below so you can check its current price. And make sure you're subscribed to our free monthly newsletter for deal alerts so you'll be alerted to if and when this speaker goes on sale. Plus, you can get a recap of everything we publish each month. Consider giving this video a thumbs up if you liked it and subscribe for more. And to see more videos on Sonos and other speakers, you can get to those by clicking on the videos above. For 6 months later, I'm Josh Tedder. Thanks for watching.